Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, Season 2, Episode 17. Let's add tech into our world. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Welcome back. Making things as simple as I always can do when I put them together in simple ways for people that make them very simple. My name is simply Jeffrey Ingram.
And technologically deficient, I am Michael Miller.
No, the web is technologically deficient. I'm actually kind of glad Zoom is working. It actually had a major outage today.
Zoom.
I know they had a major issue yesterday as well, I believe. So hopefully it will continue to work throughout this broadcast. Even though you're hearing it recorded, so if it doesn't, it's not like you're going to really even hear this part. So
I think that we're going to get this part.
Okay. So this is one of my favorite topics. I love playing video games that have technology like leveling in them because I'm that kind of geek. From Civ to any game that I can level technology.
Okay, that's what I
like. Technology. I like those kind of games.
You mean games where you can actually be the reason that the technology advances civilizationally, not just like you get a better computer for hacking in your game. Well,
that could be okay, but it's more like I'd rather build it like a crafting system than like Cyberpunk 2077. I have to say I'm enjoying it. It's definitely not a perfect game. Very ambitious, and you can tell when the giant bugs slap you in the face. But if you love the genre, if you love that style of game, it's really fun, and you can build your own stuff in there. I've been having fun with the crafting system. The first character, I'm nowhere close to finishing the game, but I'm just kind of doing a story run through, and I'm not even really trying to finish the game, to be honest. But I like to build things in there. I like to make things. I'll probably play a hacker. I like to make things. And the next game, I'll probably be a hacker because that's the way I'm going to be. But not in this game. But I can still hack, just not as good as I could. I'm really way off topic. So let's get back on to technology in our world.
It's because you can't hack it.
I'm not hacking it today. All right. So what we're talking about here, remember, we're at the framework, we're at the meta level of the world. This is not going to give you the fine-tuned detail. Thing is, what I don't want you to do, unless you're building a game like Civ, is build a technology tree. Where you're going and where can you go from there. If you go back all the way to episode, I believe, 116. Yes, episode 116. It actually probably one of my favorite episodes of the series. One of the few that's happened after episode 79. I'm joking.
For those of you unaware, that was when I joined the show.
Michael and I like to take shots at each other, even though we really don't mean it ever.
Never. Except when we do. Which is never. Essentially, like he said. Except when we do.
That episode, we actually built, I built what I love to call the simply succinct technology level method. And which I know, I think when he first saw it, he was like, this name actually kind of hurts me.
Well, it was funny because you had sent it to me, and for some reason I was like, does he realize he's being incredibly redundant and this isn't simple? Because I took it seriously. I totally thought you were being serious, and then it wasn't.
And I kind of am, because it is simple, but it's also not simple because it requires pre-born knowledge in your head for it to work. I will admit. So it's simple if you kind of know the basic flow of things, and if you kind of don't know the kind of basic flow of things, it probably won't be a very useful system. But the thing I kind of like in technology is the idea that there's different areas. And we typically think of like technology as in like Neolithic versus Bronze Age versus Iron Age versus Information Age versus Space Age, and all the different ages that we make up. And that's useful to know, but it's important, especially earlier on. You might have huge periods of time where there's overlap, and sure, you maybe know how to make a bronze weapon, but maybe you haven't figured out how to utilize it to do better farming yet. And maybe you know how to do this, but you don't know how to do that. And so there's kind of basic areas I like to look at technology from as a world builder. I probably wouldn't make it this complex if I was making a game, but for a role-playing game and the way I create frameworks, it's very useful. And I'll quickly go over the areas: agriculture, energy, communication, engineering, trades, transportation, cultural, religious, scientific, and I treat magic as a technology. But we won't talk about magic at all in this episode. That will be probably episode 18, I'm guessing. And but here is, we're not going to get into even all of those categories today, because here's the important thing is right now we're at the meta level of the world. We don't need all of the detail. And for here, we might not ever need to go into a great way. So I like to think of technology in a few different ways. There is world technology, and that is technology where, if like you were looking at an encyclopedia, it would say your world's technology was Stone Age or Bronze Age or whatever. So there's sort of like that level. What I care about at this point is what are the deviations. And so you typically go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to ask a question before you get too far into it. How do you feel about when technologies, just like what you were saying a second ago, like how do you feel about when technologies don't seem to develop? Like you'll have one technology that develops dramatically more than another relatively simple technology, and it seems incongruent with a world development. How do you feel about when that occurs? I don't mean like, oh, they're in the Stone Age and these guys are in the Bronze or Iron Age. I mean where it's like, oh, these guys are in the Stone Age and these guys have spaceships, or these guys have something that's dramatically like 2, 3, 4 tech levels higher, and it's the same world.
Here's my thing is no matter what you try and do, it's hard to prevent the spread of technology. There will always be people out to steal it if it's profitable. And so unless there's a game reason, unless there's a story reason to explain how they can keep it secret, like my gnomes from the other world, then you're kind of stuck with the idea of technology cannot be kept in silos. Now, like we've done episodes where we're talking about like the gnomes of my world. My gnomes are xenophiles, and for a long time they maintained a strategic advantage. Like at the point of true contact with the rest of the world, they were probably early industrial versus maybe Renaissance, late medieval for the rest of the world. So they had a serious technological advantage. But the problem is once the technology for transportation gets easy enough, the harder it is to be isolated, and the harder it is to hide. So there are things you could do, like Star Trek did a few times, where like they'd have a group of members of the Federation who would be like in a force field hidden compound, spying on some locals. So there could be stuff like that. You could have isolated things. In lower technology, it's easier to get away with. And I think it's the separation of technology. So the idea, I remember in Stargate, they did this where they had a massive battleship in orbit and radar couldn't pick it up. Yeah, they failed to explain why, telescopes couldn't pick it up. But, hey, sometimes, flaws, are either not explained or or they just try and explain away what people might know and hope that you don't realize that there are like literally just because radar can't see it, if you have a giant pyramid floating around in low orbit on Earth, it's going to be seen, if not by naked eye, definitely by the millions of people with telescopes. But whatever. I have a very open imagination, and I don't typically care too much because I'm a fantasy guy, not a sci-fi hard science fiction guy. But so I think it's cool. I think it creates for interesting stories. But in the long term, you're always going to have exchange when people can communicate. That's the reason why in Eurasia and Africa, you had very similar technologies all over. Now, maybe certain areas didn't adopt certain things. You had different developmental things, or maybe certain resources aren't available at certain times, which is okay. And sometimes it's really slow. And if you have something like a silkworm, where it's very hard to do without a specific creature, you can trick people, or it's maybe a little bit easier to hide. But it's like, I remember there's a story when the U.S. Forced Japan to open its trade routes. They delivered, one of the gifts they gave to the emperor was like a little toy steam engine. And it was like something like you'd have an amusement park for kids. And you still have them today if you go to amusement parks, like little choo-choo trains that go around little tracks. Well, whoever was in charge, maybe it was the emperor's idea, whoever said, okay, I want our people to take this apart and figure out how to remake it. And what they unwittingly did at that moment was that they gave the Japanese a huge jump into the industrial revolution on accident because of something they thought was a kid's toy. And within a couple hundred years, you had the Japanese fleet, competitive with anyone in the world, kicking the tush of Russia, giving the rest of the world quite a run for their money on the seas. So be careful with the gifts you give as well too. So, but yeah, I love that kind of stuff. So, but it's hard to explain story wise. But if you have some kind of story BS about it, you can kind of make it stick for most people. So that was the short answer.
That was the short version.
Okay. Did I mention this is a topic I like to talk about? All right.
Shocker.
So there's one big thing to keep in mind here. When I give my simply succinct technology list, there's two really important technologies. Early on, it's agriculture. Your ability to produce food like in excess is what gives people the ability to specialize in other fields. So if people can't spend the time to study their magic books, they can't learn to do fireballs. If they don't have time to make better pots, they don't have time to make better pots. So it's through agricultural excess that leads to pretty much all of the rest of your technology improving. But now, here's an interesting thing I've learned since I came up with the simply succinct technology method is that's sometimes a problem, though. Sometimes if you live in an area where it's very abundant, and the two places I can think of off the top of my head, Hawaii and California, were both areas very, very lush in food. Hawaii has seafood all around it. The land has all kinds of edible plants, fresh water all over. It literally was a paradise to live on compared to most parts of the world. Because of that, though, it made it harder for centralization to come about, and it took a lot longer for them to start to develop into what would have become a civilization given enough time. Now, with the smallness of the islands, it was starting to happen around the time that they had contact with the English. But it was still, it would have happened faster if it was in a place like Mesopotamia, where it's really hard to do these things. So it forced people to work together to get it done. And that, so there's actually, sometimes if the environment is too good, there's no need for the people to rush. Because like I said, there's no exciting reason to leave a hunter-gatherer lifestyle if your life's pretty easy. If your life is hard, you will look for different opportunities. So that's a caveat to there. And I would say that's true up until you get about to the information age, and when it becomes easy to store information and to transmit information, that actually probably becomes more important than agriculture. But your agriculture is probably so well developed at that point, even if it took a big step backwards, you have all the information on how to get back to where you were, or to make new breakthroughs, because you have all of the information stored. So really, once you get to storing and transmitting data, that will become probably more important than agriculture at that point. Up until that point, everything up from that point, agriculture and the ability to create excess crops is the driver of the growth of what we in the West call civilization, which are cities. So keep that in mind. And one of the things too to keep in mind when you're looking at magic is, do you want to treat magic like a technology? Like it's the thing where, hey, I learned how to use fire and I opened up a new tree called water, or maybe I have like 4 or 5 schools and within there people can become better and improved over time. Or is it simply learning, a secret that once you learn the secret, it's there forever? How does magic work in your world? And you don't have to treat it like a technology. Many times I think it's treated like it's in polar opposition to technology. So a lot of times as technology develops, magic goes away. It's a very common trope in fantasy. I don't kind of go that way, but I could, and it could still be the same thing where it's like it can develop, but then it starts to weaken. Like if you get really good at magic, it could complement agriculture, and maybe you don't find up new tools to do better agriculture, but maybe there's a spell of fertility. And that's kind of the way I run with it. So magic is something that you could very easily add in at this point. I normally would, and Gardul it is. In this world, for convenience sake, even if it is, we're not going to deal with it today because it's another episode. So there we go. And now I know what you're all itching for. It's like, how do you reuse your where, who, what, when, how, and why for this? And how does it still work? Here are the simple things. Where is the technology used? Because at this point, remember, you have your world level set in ours. And tell me if you disagree with me, Michael. Our world is Neolithic. It's Stone Age. Stone Age kind of level of weaponry across the world.
You're saying that, and for half a second, I was considering that you meant Earth.
Yes,
I'm like,
Earth.
what are you talking about?
Our brains are Stone Age, but we're a little beyond that for everything else.
I don't know why brain farted so hard on that. Yes, I would say that is a fair statement.
And I would say there's probably 2 major exceptions. One, the ability to process metal, we know is a thing that happens on this island. So where can it be used? On this island. So let's talk about, we'll go through the metal thing at this point. So we know that there's metallurgy on this island. They are Bronze Age, we'll say. Who uses the tech? It's the frog people.
I would think
the anti-Yodas, as I like to call them. That's the faction name.
I would think that building weaponry of this would not be a focus until the reptiles come. I would see it as tools. I see them doing fish hooks.
I think they have the agricultural issue, right? They live in a paradise. They figured out how to do metal, but it's like they don't have a strong governmental system. They have a strong, I think,
tribal
culture, like a sense of purpose that's singular, but there's no one leading it. Central authority. Well,
we also did talk about who uses the artifact we made in the last episode. So do we want to cover that briefly? Because that might tie into what you're talking about. So last episode we talked about artifacts, and when you're creating either small objects or very significant objects, whether it be like, a specific non-magical, we were using the example of a canoe, and like a special family canoe, or something as significant as like Excalibur. So these people have a special bident, because it's not a trident. It's got two tines, not three. It is a two-tined fork.
3 is a bad luck number in the culture, I think.
So I think you're making that up.
It's
right
a good one.
Right off the hip. It is a good one. I like it. So the bit is that there's this magical artifact, and we were trying to decide, okay, if you have a low-tech level people, a tribal-based culture, and a magical artifact, well, then who is the one that gets to wield it or use it? Is there a leader? Which leads me back to what we're discussing right now. Is there clergy? Is there shamans? Or does it go to the everyman? Like anyone can use it or what have you? Or is everyone trained to use it? And we did discuss that we think that some of the abilities to use this have been lost to time, or were just legend to begin with. They don't remember, and they thus don't know how to quite manipulate all of what this tool / weapon can do. But it still brings me back to, we're talking about governmental leadership and, how this tribe becomes a society. So,
yeah. So I think they sort of take it in turns to sort of pass it around the anarcho-syndicalist commune, and they all share responsibility here. No strong central authority, I think. I could have thought differently in the last episode, but that was last episode. Okay. Now, another thing is, when does the technology start? I think they've had this probably for, a couple centuries or so. It's like they're not about to lose it. They know how to do it. It's solidified a little bit. It's not to say they're not refining, getting better at it, but it's an established thing that they do now. It's not a struggle every time to start the fire. They know how to start fire.
But they didn't start the fire.
They did start the fire, and the fire exploded.
They did start the fire? Oh.
All over your face. That's something else.
Yeah, I'm saying we didn't start the fire.
No.
See
we could start the fire. We will start a fire.
Someday.
And so now, how long is the technology important? Bronze is a fairly important metal. A lot of people think like in the Iron Age, bronze sort of became unimportant. That's absolutely not true. Bronze, for one, is a metal that won't rust. Not as good as like a stainless steel, but it works much better in water than say iron. Iron does really poorly in water,
especially in salt water.
Especially in salt water, until you could learn how to make certain forms of stainless steel. Where typically, I think they call them red metals. Is that what it is? They call them red metals, Michael. You know all this.
Well, the term red metal is not something I'm familiar with, so I can't answer that question.
I think it's like copper,
Sorry.
brass, bronze, or I think they call it red metal. Anyone who wants to interrupt right now and tell me I'm wrong? No, audience? Okay.
You're wrong.
Except for Michael's.
Oh, except for me? Okay, I see.
But essentially, those forms of metal, like I said, they're not as good as certain kinds of stainless steel, but they're a little bit more resistant. So for here, I think until you get to stainless steel, it remains important. I don't know how long that is year-wise, but that's not important. I know sort of how long ago it is, or how long in the future it is. When people figure out how to make stainless steel, this becomes a much less relevant thing, which could be even longer because of how poorly iron does. People will go like, or maybe it'll come up sooner because people will be like, hey, this iron is so much easier to make. I wish it wouldn't dissolve. And maybe they'll keep working with it a bit more and they'll get to stainless steel a little bit sooner. Who knows? I think you could argue that like the Japanese and certain parts of Arabia, Damascus, they could actually very early on, they could they were, I don't know if they're at stainless steel, but they were getting there. They had a much more refined metal than was used in most parts of the world. And then why is this important? Simple thing is stone tools suck. Stone weapons can be effective, but stone tools suck. They're actually worse than the weapons. Yeah.
I'm gonna argue with that one.
Okay.
Well, it's not so much that stone tools suck. It's just that metal tools are vastly superior.
No. And I'll explain to you why. They
What do you
wear
mean?
down much faster. That's why they suck.
Well, it depends on what you're doing with them.
For the things that humans do, like, like tanning the hides of or like scraping hides off of animals and stuff. Turning plants into meal to cook with.
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of functions you
milling
wear tools a lot. Milling,
is that the word you're looking for?
Yes, that was the word I was looking for, and I was trying to get around it.
Note the miller came up with that one.
That's true. Cliche.
But also like, making stone axes. So you're talking about cutting down trees and processing lumber is very important in the building
and very hard to do.
But I also I don't see these people doing a lot of that. Like,
no. But I'm saying in general, stone tools suck because they wear easier. Now, and there's definitely periods of time where it's true that they're not. Obsidian makes some of the sharpest crap there is. And diamonds are really hard. So
that's a stone tool. If you could make a diamond tool.
It's not exclusively true, but largely for most stones that people can get their hands on easy, the wear and tear is hard. It's like the amazing thing is, it's like, a lot of like the really ancient Egyptian, like early tombs were pre-metal. So, like they're doing quarry work with stone. They're usually using stone to beat stone. And then they get to the bronze.
What beats rock? Nothing beats rock.
Good
old rock.
And then finally they get the copper, and then they get some tin, and that goes really well with the copper. With some nickel, and that makes bronze. And so it's really, really cool stuff. But some of the stuff, weapon wise becomes vastly superior. That's where you can start putting like points onto things for real. You can come up with like long edges on something where if you look at like a Stone Age style sword, like the Aztecs used, what they would do is they would have a bunch of bits of obsidian around a hardwood, essentially blade, and it could cut, and you would not want to get hit by the thing. But a Damascus steel sword,
it's gonna tear. It's gonna tear it up pretty good. Yeah.
There's no competition in the damage it will do. But then again, sometimes that maybe leads you to the cultural needs to like, well, we use our weapons to capture people, not.
Well, I was just actually going to say that.
Sometimes cultures can develop around the technology too. So, but really, like I said, it will stay important for a really long time. So, what do we call the where, the who, the what, the when, the how, the why? When you get through that framework wise, your meta level framework, that's really all you need. And for here, we could go back and say, okay, ships are probably a little bit more advanced than Stone Age on this world as a whole. And that's simply because there's not a lot of land, there's a lot of ocean. So it becomes incumbent on people. If you have a drought, you might need to get out a bit further to get to different fishing sources. Maybe you have groups of people like our apex predators who are about to invade the island, and maybe they spend time hunting the big fish in the middle of the ocean. So I think the shipping technology, much like at the Pacific, is much more advanced. Like it was in Norway, much more advanced than like in the Mediterranean. And that too is, most of this is also open ocean, so you need better ships. You can't get away with bullcrap ships. So I think you have better shipping technology than if you looked at like Earth in the Stone Age. You probably have to go out to, I can't remember the tribe that predated the Polynesians, but there was a group of people who had a Silk Road size trade route from Papua New Guinea to Australia, I believe. But it was like 3,000 miles long of trade routes these people had set up for generations. They started in Taiwan, and they kind of migrated down to Australia, and their ancestors became the Polynesians. So it's more than possible, even at a very early age. But for most of Earth, it didn't develop that way because of massive continents. There was less need to worry about having to go out into the ocean when you could just turn around and go kill your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
That's just easier, I guess. Or maybe it's less scary to start. I don't know what the difference is. But there we go. You
don't know what the difference is between developing boats and killing your neighbor?
Well,
I need to explain this to you?
I know what the
I know your morality is very flexible, Jeff, but this seems like a no-brainer to me.
I don't know. I mean, hurting the environment and the ocean is one of the worst things people can do in my book. So I'm going to leave it there. Okay. Do you have a world-building task for us, Mr. Miller, or any parting words?
I would say that two cautions when it comes to developing your technologies. One, consider how different technologies are going to affect other technologies, but also don't allow that to hamstring yourself. It's fictional. It's your world. If you want to be like, okay, well, I'm going to have steam engines, but then, because I have steam engines, then that means it's going to play out this way. It doesn't have to play out that way. You know what I mean? Don't let your world, this is kind of a grand sweeping idea. So it's not just a technology thing, but basically don't let your world take over. Don't let your world build itself. Yeah. Sometimes that's a benefit to you. Sometimes you can lay down certain foundations and then things fall into place and you don't have to work very hard, and that's not bad. But other times that'll start to get out of hand and it'll go places you don't want it to. So just don't let it get out of hand on you. That's all.
Yeah. It's kind of like the generic problem people have with characters a lot of times, where they create characters that won't do things that they need them to do in the story. Like, well, they make them do something else first, remold them into what you need them to be. Or kill them. Just kill the characters. That's more of a game master.
I was going to say, stop killing everybody, Jeff.
All right. That's Michael's task for Jeffrey for the day.
Yes, stop killing everyone. Stop killing people and taking their boats.
In your morality.
Stop killing everybody and taking their boats.
All right, and now for the real world task. I'll tell you, get out of your social media and technology for a little while. Just stop it. Get out, turn off your notifications on your apps. Don't let your phone run your life. These technologies are developed to run your life, to get you to act in a certain way, to behave in a way, which is typically to use them. And a lot of these things have great utilitarian value. I'm not saying become a Luddite and destroy your phone and go build a bow of obsidian. Even though that might be a fun thing to do.
That would be totally awesome. I'm saying do that. Destroy your phone and make a bow out of obsidian.
Learn how to do
that'd be amazing.
Chipping. Make a new phone out of stone. But
that would be incredibly impressive.
There's a great documentary called Social Dilemma, and it kind of oversimplifies and it maybe exaggerates here or there, but its basic fundamental truths seem pretty spot on to me. Explains the reason why you get to tech entrepreneurs, why their kids don't touch technology, or they touch it a different way at a much older age than we allow our kids to. Watch The Social Dilemma. Don't get mad. Just take control of your life.
Get even.
Your email and Facebook don't have to notify you when things happen inside of there. You don't need them to tell you that someone just liked your post. Don't let them do that to you. So that's just my little parting wisdom of the day. And hopefully if everyone starts doing this, the world will be a little bit better place. Hopefully. All right. I love you all. I kiss you all in a very platonic way. Have a great week. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.guardduel.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the myth rules hot.